Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I really salute your courage to come and sit in this session. I think by now there should be listening or listeners' fatigue. Our session is about the security matrix or the security mix of Pakistan, both internal and external. And I could not have had a better panel here to talk about issues because I have a security expert, I have an academician with security thrust, and I have a fantastic social scientist on the panel. So I'm going to introduce them first, and I hope by then people will trickle in and settle down so that we can formally begin the sessions. I would also request who are mending the door to make sure people either leave or sit down. I would request people at the end of the hall to either join us here, we'd be very happy, or perhaps leave. So the panel here with me is Mr. Ikram Sehgal, Chairman Pathfinder, a security analyst, author. He has actually come up with 12 volumes of the articles he's written over the years and had the courage to have them published. So, you know, we all write and say things, but to have the courage to stand by that is kind of hard. Ikram Sehgal Saab has done this, has strong views and stands by them. And then, of course, we have Dr. Salma Malik. And Salma is a friend, is from Quaid-e-Azam University, is a very senior academician, and you see her making very intelligent comments about Pakistan and Pakistan security, both in the academic intercourse and on the media. And then we have Haider Nizamani Saab. I will take the pride of saying that he's recently joined IBA. So this panel is dominated by IBA. And he's a social scientist and has a slightly different take on things, which is extremely critical when we're talking about issues of security. So what I'm going to start with is something President Xi Jinping said last year in a speech that made ripples all around the world. And he said, it takes a good goldsmith to make good steel. And then he further on said, China believes in bloodless battles and negotiations. But if you cross our red lines, or if you try to empower us, bully us, oppress us, subjugate us, China would encounter you with a wall of steel. And this created a lot of ripples around the world because some people said China, with these kind of statements, has arrived. And the world was talking about a Cold War between the United States of America and China, with Russia being on the side. The situation today, as I speak to you, is that we have a hot war between Russia and Ukraine. But I say it's a war between Russia and the rest, as much as the West would try not to give it the color of a global conflict, so to say. In all of this, situation for middle powers becomes very critical. And Pakistan is not just a middle power, Pakistan is also a pivot state. And it's not just Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah who in 1948 said that. It was also Paul Kennedy who said Pakistan was, is, and will remain the pivot state. And it is not a coincidence that we are constantly sought after and engaged with and cultivated. How we handle that cultivation is another matter. We've also come up with a security policy, which is not deepening of security. It is at best widening. We talk about keeping our deterrence alive, our defense infrastructure alive, but at the same time, we want it to be pro-people. We want it to be pro-youth. In all of this, the question that I want to put to my very esteemed panelist here is, and Salma, I'm going to take you there first so you can prepare your thought process, is crucial. And that is that, yes, we are a nuclear power, and thank God for that after what has happened to Ukraine. But we are also struggling with a shrinking sovereign space pivoted on the constraints of our economy? And can any state claim for any kind of security if it has an economy which is actually imploding? And is Pakistan's economy imploding? Salma, Malik, over to you.
Thank you so much, Huma. Thanks for surprising me. A few things that I would like to say here is when we look at the situation today, there is a bit of this nostalgia that exists in people that it is Cold War. Is that better now? Is it Cold War all over again? Definitely, or it is a situation where the Cold War is developing, but we need to be clear on few things. Number one, the dynamics are very different. So having that nostalgia, having that comfort zone that, oh, it's the yesteryear's Cold War, the binaries are yet again redefined. Either it is between China or the US, or it's between Russia or the US. We need to be careful. The environment is different, the atmospherics are different, the actors are different. There may be a hangover of the old sentiment and the old school of thought. However, a lot of things have changed. Especially at this particular moment when we are looking at what is developing in Ukraine vis-a-vis Russia, it is more to do with Russia reclaiming or trying to assert its space, not exactly reassert its space, but assert its space in an area which the US is slowly and gradually encroaching upon. One aspect. The second aspect to this Cold War revisit scenario is that the narrative, the meta-narrative that is circulating is the narrative that is Western dominated. And we've also seen what is happening and the rapid fire media situation that we have with us today. We've also seen those type of glitches that are happening in India where wrong people are being shouted upon and they're being asked to stand responsible for their countries and they're not the people. So we really don't know. It's a very gray zone at this particular moment. Yet the fact is that we need to be very careful about the type of media images that are coming out, the type of a meta-narrative that is creating. To your question on sovereignty, absolutely, I totally agree with you, is an aspect which is very, very fluid. And it's not only the economic sovereignty question that that we need to examine with cyber, with artificial intelligence, with so much of eyes in the sky and several other things that are happening around us. It is difficult to judge and figure out how sovereign can you claim your space to be. It is no longer in that old school of thought, the Cold War dynamics that the four walls were protected, the gates were closed, and you were sovereign. No, it is no longer there.
I will bring Haider Zamani साहब onto this. और मेरा ख्याल है कि आपकी सोच व्यू थोड़ी सी मुख्तलिफ है. तो मैं चाहूँगी कि जब आप सिक्योरिटी पे कमेंट करें तो आप मुझे ये बताएं, इस रियलिज्म बैक विद अ बैंग? क्योंकि अब तो शुक्र भेजना चाहिए ना कि हम न्यूक्लियर पावर थे और जब सारे सवाल उठते थे कि डिफेंस पे खर्चा कम करो तभी दूसरी सिक्योरिटी जो है उसको स्ट्रेंथन किया जा सकता है, वो शायद हवा में उड़ गए. तो क्या अब सिक्योरिटी की जब हम बात करते हैं वो सिर्फ वाइडनिंग हो सकती है, डीपनिंग नहीं हो सकती? और ये जो इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी और एक्सटर्नल सिक्योरिटी में हमने ये डिफरेंशिएशन क्रिएट कर दी है, क्या ये एग्जिस्ट भी करती है? चौसर तो कहता था कि एक्सटेंशन है डोमेस्टिक पॉलिसी की हर चीज.
Well, first of all, I don't know, I mean, like, say, how my sound is projecting because, is it okay? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Yes, I think, I mean, I hold non-realist views about security and how security is prioritized and made in a country. And then, of course, I mean, like, if it is made through the so-called realist lens, with that mono lens, I submit that it leads to minefield of problems, and Pakistan is a good test case for that. Because, first of all, as you mentioned, I subscribe to the view that this distinction between external and internal, it is more for our analytical convenience than for practical purposes. In practically, it is these both things, our external kind of compulsions and countries or societies' internal dynamics. They shape each other. So they can't be divorced from each other. In Pakistan's case, we have tried, at least we've tried to, the security policy makers, they have tried to say that as if our domestic inputs don't impact our external security policy, which I think is a myth, which the sooner they disabuse themselves of, the better it will be for the country. And I'll just give now a couple of examples, and then maybe we can have a further conversation about it. A lot has been made these days about the just published, I think it's called the National Security Policy document.
Yes.
And it tells that Pakistan is now going to move away from geostrategic to geoeconomics. Well, if you read the document, at least the published version of it, it literally reads like an advanced undergraduate paper on human security in a course that I taught some 20 years ago. There's nothing. If you know ABC of human security courses, this is advanced undergraduate level course on that, because it does not tell us how it is going to make that shift possible from geostrategic to geoeconomics. Because unless you address the elephant in the room, which is India factor in Pakistan's foreign policy. If you don't address that, if you tell that, look, with India, we'll only kind of have normal ties only and if Kashmir dispute is resolved. And Kashmir dispute resolved, of course, by that we mean on our terms and conditions, not on their terms and conditions. So so in other words, there's no way that with India, our ties can go from geostrategic to geoeconomics, right? We talk about Prime Minister goes to Russia, says that, oh, we are going to go and diversify our natural resources or sources of our gas and all that. Well, across the Durand line, we have a political dispensation of which, unwittingly or wittingly, Pakistan has become their spokesperson or lobbyist internationally without any reasonable stability or solution in sight.
So you really think there is no distinction? And from what you're just saying, you think there is strategic confusion when Pakistan projects its security policy? If I sum it up?
I would say it's not confusion. It is I think
it is deliberate.
It's naivety because
okay.
When it comes, I'll just give another example. In a lead up to a trip to Russia, Prime Minister Pakistan gives interview to Russian television, and when about something about India, and here is Prime Minister of Pakistan, a country of 220 million people, and he says that, well, he knows India better than anyone else just because he has been there visiting as a cricketer.
That's a style of talking. I could say. But Nizamani Sahab, hold your thought.
Yeah.
Ikram Sehgal Sahab, I'm not even going to post a question to you. So we have so many things there: strategic confusion, naivety, and are you good?
No.
Why don't you take us?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right.
So yes.
Well, I want to start off with geostrategy and geoeconomics. Look at Pakistan. First of all, people do not know, for 12,000 years we had the Mehergarh civilization. We had the Mehergarh civilization. And then came the Indus civilization, the Gandhara civilization, down to ultimately Islam, Hindu, Islam, whatever. The problem, I think we have so we never had a problem about roti or kapda, because this place was always khud kafil. Our problem was our geostrategic location. Every invader thought it expedient to come here. And he always thought it nice to pass through this area, whether it was the Greeks, whether it was the Mongols, whether it was the Persians, whether it was Abbasids, anybody that thought it convenient, ultimately the British, which followed, etc. But why? Today, we are part of South Asia. We are part of the Middle East. We are part of Central Asia. We have the China-Pakistan economic corridor, very much a reality, which I would like to comment, since it's a IBA-dominated panel, that your dean once said it's a figment of imagination, right? He actually said it in IBA, that it's a figment of imagination. Then you have the North-South corridor, which is now coming through Central Asia and pass through Afghanistan and down through Chaman or Kabul, whatever. Then you have the old RCD highway, which should be known as the East-West corridor. This is an existing corridor. And then, of course, you have your linkages through Shah Bahar to the Gulf. So basically, you have 4 major corridors passing through this place. How can you have geoeconomics without geostrategy? Your geoeconomics actually depends upon geostrategy. And therefore, it is incumbent upon you to first, and I agree with Nana Sahib as far as the priorities of external or internal changes, but I disagree about him about them. There are certain external challenges by itself, and there are certain internal challenges by itself. But gradually, they are being blurred at many places where the external and internal changes come together. And therefore, you have to respond to those challenges like that. For example, you cannot put cyber attacks into external challenges. Cyber attacks can take place from within the country. You cannot put, water at the moment just for internal challenges, because India can come and try to stop your water. Similarly, you have a lot of other things. So, I really admired the national security policy that you worked upon. My actually objection to that was that the first thing about the national security policy or strategy should have been to describe the threat perception. Analyze the threat perception. What is the threats? Whether it's external, internal, food, water, cyber, whatever. Once you've analyzed the threats, and then you come to, okay, fine, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do. So, if you look at it, if you look at it and you, look at it in a holistic manner, you have to actually understand that today Pakistan is blessed by being placed where it is. No great achievement of ours.
It's a pivot state.
It's a pivot state
Yes.
in all this area, right? So, I think we should first decide that we have a geostrategic analysis to first understand where we're going to go geoeconomically.
Well, on that note, I would agree with you. I don't think there is a clear-cut distinction between geostrategic and geoeconomic, more so in today's world. So Ladakh, China, and Russia and India were actually at loggerheads with each other, but their trade volumes in 2021 have actually gone up. There is no way Europe or America can function without the supply chains of China. That is the truth. And even today, when the world is in a financial warfare with Russia, so to say, there are 2 questions that are being asked. One is, of course, the sustainability of the war by Russia, but the other is the sustainability of the Western world to carry on with these sanctions, because it is going to hurt everyone. Having said this, coming back to Pakistan, we are a pivot state, yes. We've been drawn into conflicts, yes. We are now a part of a Belt Road Initiative, yes. But today, once again, if you read the headlines of today's newspaper, they're interesting. European Union is angry with us for not shouting out to Russia and saying you're wrong, which they have not done to India, by the way. And on water, there is some collaboration happening between India and Pakistan. So, and may I also add that India and Pakistan have had wars, but we've always fought very civilized wars, conscious of the deterrence that exists, the mutually hurting deterrence that exists between us. Salma, here are our internal threats far more, or our threat perception far higher than our external, because since I think Parvez Ashraf Kiani sahab, General Parvez Ashraf Kiani, it was categorically accepted publicly by the military generals of Pakistan that the internal threat, including terrorism, is far greater than the threat on our borders.
Thank you, Huma. Couple of things. Number one, in line with this particular scenario, if you have sound economy, only then you can have a sound defense, yes, right? Absolutely. So this particular debate about geoeconomics, geostrategic, geopolitical, just take geo or of all of these aspects, spin the story around, it bogs down to the same aspect. Unless and until you have a sound economy, you cannot build a strong military. Your military can only be strong for two reasons. Either you indigenously develop, your R&D sector is so well evolved, which means that you have educational program which is so advanced that you have your own patents, you have your own way of thinking, your people are way ahead, and you have a military industrial complex. The question is open to everyone: how big a military industrial complex, if we have, hypothetically speaking, does Pakistan support? We don't. The industry that we have, the military industry that we have in Pakistan, is technically the same industry with very little volume attached to it that we inherited when Pakistan did not get its due share at the time of partition, because you cannot move 16 military industries that the British had constructed.
Salma, fast forward today.
Yeah.
We are a country with full spectrum deterrence.
Agreed. So
Nuclear
that's
deterrence.
my next point. That's my next point. The next thing is, you have a nuclear program which is a safety guarantee against a lot of things, and genuine safety guarantee. And then we have issues such as Ukraine, where we say, if we didn't have the nuclear weapons, this is what would have happened to us. However, think of a scenario where you have your nuclear weapons entirely secured, and I'm not saying give up nuclear weapons because they're very important to us, but you have nothing to eat. You have nothing to support that military with. You have lawlessness in your country. How would you manage these things? So I think there has to be a decent balance or a mix between the traditional, the non-traditional, the soft security problems and the hardcore security problem, external, internal, however you would like to phrase them. But you cannot prioritize one against the other. You cannot pitch one against the other. You have to take all of these things
You have to
in
have a
tandem.
multi-pronged strategy.
Yes, absolutely.
Dr. Nizamani Sahab, you have a different view. I sort of gather that. But I would also ask you to comment on how Pakistan could not have invested in its external security. Wasn't it a survival threat, an existential threat? And also because the theater of war over the years only expanded from the eastern border to the western border.
No, I'm not at all suggesting that Pakistan basically should have left all its guards down just because a certain conceptual framework says so. It is striking the balance and thinking through those, whatever objectives we choose, thinking through consequences of that and whether, how do they fit in. For example, I mean, like we talked about this full spectrum nuclear deterrence. Again, as a student of nuclear weapons or nuclear deterrence, my concern is that we know from the history of nuclear weapons as they have existed since 45 that nuclear deterrence works when both adversaries share, of course they don't share the politics or they don't share the strategic objectives, but they share the view that nuclear weapons are effectively for deterrence as long as both parties know that. Now, what has happened, I mean, like, and this is worrisome, because on the one side, you have chest-thumping prime ministers in New Delhi, which also kind of say are willing to basically this rattle the sword of nuclear threat. And on Pakistan's side, we say that the nuclear weapons are effective deterrents, right? Which means that they are going to prevent a war between India and Pakistan. Now, the Indian strategic thinking, basically after acquiring nuclear weapons, when both these countries have gone nuclear, Indian strategic thinking is that a limited war is possible between India and Pakistan under nuclear umbrella. We think that Kargil was not a war. Indians think that it was a war. So the thing is that, again, there is mismatch of understanding how India and Pakistan are going to conduct their relations under nuclear umbrella, and pure in about whether these are going to be effective deterrents, or we are going to kind of say have these, border skirmishes, which, I mean, we know that there's no foolproof way of saying that they will not escalate either through deliberation or through accident. So it's a question.
Like I said earlier, the deterrence in our case has worked, and there is a conviction after what has happened in Ukraine. In fact, there's the people are actually, they're saying thank God for that. But Dr. Salma, you wanted to make a comment, and then I'll come to Dr.
Thank you so much.
Ikram Sehgal.
Unlike Haider, who has written a huge, thick volume on nuclear politics, I have no such things to be proud of. But one thing I would say, the point that you earlier said that India-Pakistan wars have been very neat and kind of a civilized textbook wars, especially when it comes to demining after 65, 71 and all of those things. But the very fact is that they are too close for comfort, right? Both are right next door to each other. The areas which have been the classic ground zeros of the battleground are the ones which are also the bread baskets for both the countries. So they have to be very civilized once they de-escalate. One aspect. The second aspect, the point that Haider has raised here, is a very important point about the chest thumping in the limited war scenario. In the classic nuclear deterrence literature, this possibility of limited war has always been part and parcel of this deterrence aspect, right? So even the oldies who wrote the textbook or the 101s of nuclear deterrence, they said that whatever deterrence you create, this possibility of adventurism under the nuclear shadow would always remain high. Plus the fact that, add to this the point that Haider has said, which is very, very important and critical, when you have emotive, chest-thumping ideologues, that makes this possibility of limited war actually much more dangerous and unpredictable. So that is the main danger.
If I may take the discussion forward.
I'd like
You see,
to make a comment.
you want to make a comment?
Yes.
Okay, after that. I'll pose the question.
You see, this thing about Ukraine, the thing about Ukraine, when Ukraine got its independence from the Soviet Union, one of the things they signed was that we will not be a nuclear power, and they gave up all the nuclear weapons, right? And today, they're suffering the consequences of it, right? And I think people have a short memory. It's just like, and NATO was telling them, okay, fine. It's just like two people walking down a road, and somebody comes up, a bigger person, and said, pushes this thing. And one person picks up a fight with that person. And once the fight is going on, he says, "Are you going to fight me?" He said, "No, this guy will." NATO. So this is what NATO did to Ukraine.
Yes, absolutely.
They egged them on, and when the time came to fight, they were not there.
And there's a lot
Right.
of lip service also.
And it has happened to us.
Twice.
No,
Brilliant.
it just happened. It happened to us in 1965 when we were members of CA2 and CENTO, when they were supposed to come to our help.
And they said it was only
No,
communist.
and then they said they stopped our weapons. It happened to us in 1971 when we expected the 7th Fleet to help in East Pakistan. No, nobody came to our help. अब आ रही है जी आपको?
हाँ, जी। एक और माइक है हमारे पास? हाँ, वो कह रहे हैं कि हमारे साथ 2 दफ़ा ये हुआ है, 65 में भी और 71 में भी, जो वादा पूरा नहीं किया गया।
और दूसरी बात कि देखिए, ये आपको the best deterrent is your own. And the only reason we have not gone to war with India up till now is because of the fact that we have a nuclear deterrent.
All right, but let's move the discussion forward. rationality should prevail. Sanity should prevail. And if you're talking about internal security, South Asia is one of the least integrated regions in the world, with the potential of having so much more. And despite our full spectrum deterrence, despite the chest-thumping prime minister next door, Pakistan recently is categorically said that we want functional relations with all our neighbors, including India. So despite the problems, the dialogue is still on the table. But taking the discussion forward and coming to the internal security, can we really talk about internal security without referring to what happened in KPK? The mosque attack. 60 people have died, and scholars are injured. And people are trying to turn it into a sectarian construct by saying that a Shia mosque was attacked. This is also a threat to our solidarity and security. Dr. Salma, sitting right here, lost 6 people she knows in that one blast. And I think that is a bigger threat, where this war or the security construct, whatever that you like to call it, मतलब ये जंग borders पे तो नहीं रही ना, ये जंग तो मेरे स्कूलों में, मेरी गलियों में, मेरे कूचों में, मेरी बाजारों में, मेरी मस्जिद में है. और इसमें सिर्फ मेरे वो दफा करने वाले सिपाही तो नहीं मर रहे, इसमें तो मेरे बच्चे, मेरी औरतें, मेरे नमाजी भी मर रहे हैं. तो ये जो इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी कॉन्स्ट्रक्ट है, ये कैसे ठीक होगा? सलमा, आप और फिर
थैंक यू हुमा. देखिए, बात ये है कि जब वॉर ऑन टेरर चल रही थी और पाकिस्तान की मिलिट्री बहुत ज़्यादा इन्वॉल्व थी मसाइल को हल करने में, तो एक टाइम ऐसा आया कि पाकिस्तान एयरफोर्स के लिए ये प्रॉब्लम हो गई कि जहाँ टेररिस्ट हाइड आउट्स को उन्होंने स्ट्राइक करना था, वहाँ सिविलियन पॉपुलेशन थी, एंड दे बिकेम द बैड बॉयज़ ऑफ द पिक्चर. जहाँ मिलिट्री जाती थी वो कहते थे ये हमारे ही लोगों को मार रहे हैं. मिलिट्री में भी एक क्राइसिस ऑफ कॉन्फिडेंस आ रहा था कि आई मीन यू नो द ग्रे लाइंस आर सो ब्लर्ड. एंड देन केम द APS इंसिडेंट, राइट. एंड एक बहुत ही अनफॉर्चुनेट हादसे ने सारे मुल्क को एक पॉइंट पे मुतहदा किया कि जी अब इस मसले को हमने हल करना है. नाउ देयर इज़ नो टेकिंग साइड्स, देयर आर नो गुड्स और बैड्स, एवरीवन इज़ बैड, सो उसको करें. बहुत छोटा सा वो विंडो थी जिसको हम लोगों ने नैप बनाया, वो सारा कुछ किया. कुछ चीज़ें हम कर सके, बहुत सी चीज़ें हम नहीं कर सके. आई थिंक हमारे लिए ज़रूरत ये है कि इस चीज़ को जो कल हुआ है, इस हादसे को वन ऑफ अपॉर्चुनिटी ना समझें. दिस इज़ एक्चुअली द वार्निंग.
पहली दफ़ा भी नहीं हुआ है सलमा,
और ये पहली दफ़ा भी नहीं हुआ. बट अब आप ये देखें कि इंक्रीमेंटली इसका साइज़ बढ़ता जा रहा है. ठीक है, कहीं 2 लोग फौत हुए, कहीं 4, एक चेक पोस्ट पे 4 फौजी बेचारे टारगेट हुए. हर चीज़ को हम रैशनलाइज करते जा रहे हैं. अब इसका मोमेंटम बढ़ रहा है, विच टेक्निकली मीन्स दैट वी आर रिवर्टिंग बैक टू द ओल्ड विशियस साइकिल. इसको यहीं नैप करें, इसको यहीं ख़त्म करें और इसके लिए ड्रास्टिक एक्शंस लें. और इसमें यहाँ बात करने की ज़रूरत ही नहीं है कि ये गिरजाघर है, मंदिर है, सुन्नी मस्जिद है, हनफी मस्जिद है, शिया मस्जिद है. इट्स अ प्लेस, it's a sanctuary. It should not be attacked. Any place should not be attacked. हमने बड़ी मेहनत से
बट ये हमारा इंटरनल
इस point पे
सिक्योरिटी
लेके आए.
चैलेंज है ना जी. लोग अटैक करते हैं. मैं लास्ट राउंड ऑफ कर रही हूँ, फिर मुझे आपके से सवाल लूँगी. निज़ामानी साहब, वेरी क्विक कमेंट. ये जो हमारे इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी थ्रेट है, जिसमें बैरूनी हाथ है, और उसके हम डोसियर्स भी पकड़ा चुके और टेंजेबल एविडेंस भी है. और बांग्लादेश जब बन गया, आज वो खड़े होके बहुत गरूर से कहते हैं कि जी हाँ हमने पाकिस्तान तोड़ा, तो वो कोशिश वहाँ ख़त्म तो नहीं हुई है, वो जारी भी है. इस पूरी सूरत हाल में आप इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी थ्रेट को कैसे देखते हैं?
And I'll not comment on Bangladesh because I humbly disagree with you on that, but I'll not comment on that.
नहीं, वहाँ हमारी गलती थी.
हाँ नहीं, but the thing is, so I will, in the interest of time, I will not go on that. बाकी जो हमारे internal या those, वो ये है कि let's admit and accept it that the kind of region that we have, हम बाकियों को छोड़ दें, हम सिर्फ अफगानिस्तान, इंडिया और पाकिस्तान को ले लें. Given how like intertwined, whether we like it or not, how intertwined our societies are historically and everything, जो भी connections है क्या, और गिवन हम तीनों पार्टीज़ के एक दूसरे के ऊपर क्लेम्स एंड काउंटर क्लेम्स, हम आई एम नॉट सेइंग कि जी किसके सही हैं किसके गलत हैं फॉर नाउ, लेकिन उसमें एक बात जो थोड़ी ख़तरनाक हुई है वो ये हो गई है कि न्यूक्लियर डिटेरेंस ने हो सकता है कि लार्ज स्केल वॉर को प्रिवेंट किया हो इन मुल्कों में, लेकिन व्हाट इट हैज़ काइंड ऑफ it has become open season for carrying out proxy wars, right? अब उसमें as a Pakistani state से yes, अगर if there is external hand in something, it should be shown and it should be kind of say demonstrated, but at the same time it should not be used as an excuse to absolve our law enforcing agencies from their due responsibilities, right? Incident होता ही नहीं है, उससे पहले ही जो है वो forensic evidence everything is washed out कि जी वो external ने कर दिया.
नहीं, और
So-
maybe a multi-pronged people-centric policy as well. इकराम सहगल साहब आप फरमाइए, ये जो आपने प्रॉक्सी वॉर का नाम लिया, मैं उसमें ऐड कर देती हूँ हाइब्रिड वॉर का कॉन्स्ट्रक्ट, क्योंकि वो इस वक्त सबसे बड़ा चैलेंज है.
देखिए, there is no doubt that we are now the target of a concerted hybrid warfare. And that hybrid warfare, of course, part of it we saw yesterday, when actually 90 people have now died.
90 people,
90,
that's unfortunate, yes.
Right? And about 100 are injured, and many of them are badly injured. The thing is, our problem is our courts, which tend to, on any pretext, give the benefit of doubt to the terrorist. You know, the Islamabad, the Peshawar High Court actually asked for the release of terrorists. Right now, convicted terrorists, convicted of murder, were released because of that. So we have to get our priorities right. Whether we have, you know, human rights is certainly important. People's rights are certainly important. But I think the rights of the 90 people who died are also important, right? So I think we have to be clear of how much blanket authority we have to give to the law enforcement agencies to make sure. Now look at this, you know, we have this anti-terrorist, policy. But the point is, it has never been implemented in letter and spirit. You know, it's been implemented in bits and parts, and it's never been implemented. Today, Article 245 is still in force in many places of the country. But do you know that under Article 245, if somebody would take action, somebody would come to one of the courts, and I'm not going to mention which court, and take a stay order or take a blanket order, right? But the major thing which I must point out is corruption. You are corrupting society, and you are corrupting society by corrupting the judiciary, right? And as long as you can manage to corrupt the judiciary, that will be the greatest challenge to countering hybrids.
So it's also institutional decay that you're
Yes.
referring to. I would also just like to add one small comment here, and that is that yes, we should not give our law enforcement agencies a free hand, but we should also remember how they have been sacrificed when the state abdicated with the dharna that we had in Lahore. What was done to our law enforcement agencies is unforgivable. So I think we need a more rounded approach to security here. Ladies and gentlemen, I will now open the session to Q&A. मैं ज़्यादा time दे रही हूँ सवालों के लिए, लेकिन मैं चाहूँगी कि आप छोटा सवाल करें ताकि हम ज़्यादा सवाल ले सकें. This gentleman here, और फिर मैं चाहूँगी कि पीछे से भी सवाल ले लें. यहाँ ये तशरीफ़ ले आएँ, इनसे बात कर लेते हैं, फिर आपसे बात कर लेते हैं. ठीक है? Can somebody give him a mic? ऐसे भी बात कीजिए, आवाज़ आ जाएगी. आइए आप बात कीजिए, आवाज़ आएगी. अपना तारुफ भी कराइएगा.
Sayyid Khawar Mehdi, beautiful discussion. A comment and a question. Quick comment, you mentioned something very interesting. I don't know if it was a spur of the moment, but badi khoobsurat baat ki. The wars between India and Pakistan were very civilized wars. This is a whole chapter in itself, and it's sort of SOP, how to have civilized wars for the rest of the world. I think this should be done. You can undertake as the next project. The question is, with reference to internal security issues, we talked about external and internal. Internal security issues, the fault lines the threats, the deep fissures that we have to appreciate, understand, and when they're internal, you have to give them due recognition, acknowledgement, and respect also at times, because these are my own brothers and sisters. We cannot just say it's a threat. It's a threat that cannot just be eliminated, but it has to be understood. And at times you have to be very conciliatory and you have to address their grievances. A case and example, recently, the PTM, अब तो 2 धड़े उसके भी हो गए, NDM और PTM है, Pashtun Tahfiz and that. We are treating them like stepchildren. On the contrary, our security agencies, which is right, they were going after TTP for a conciliatory approach, which is, I believe, fine, but they failed miserably in it. The case is comparative. You are neglecting your own people and you're going out of way, appeasing them, sucking up to them, and how badly we felt, and I'm glad
comment
we did.
well taken. Would anybody want to make a comment on that? I think there's agreement on that actually, or would you like to say something?
I think, we can't, first I would like to comment on your civilized war. There is no war that is civilized, ever.
Okay, so
There is no war that is romantic. I do believe there are very few people in this room who have fought wars. I have fought 2.5 wars. It's not nice to have bodies of your brothers and friends and soldiers lying around you. So war is never civilized, to start with. Number 2, I think the main thing is of handling things. But if you have geopolitical confusion, like you said, national security confusion, and I give you 2 classic examples of that, which were this thing. Till 1971, the strategic thought in Pakistan was the defense of the East lies in the West. So they put 15 divisions in West Pakistan and 1 division in East Pakistan, right? Right? A moron thought that up, right? The second moron thought about that Afghanistan gives us strategic depth. Afghanistan just gives us strategic headaches, nothing else, right? They're a predator nation. They have nothing. We give them food and everything else.
Strategic headache, vulnerabilities. आप सवाल करना चाह रहे हैं? आप भी करना चाह रहे हैं? We have time. हम सवाल ले पाएंगे इंशाल्लाह सबके. Who's handling the mics? जी आप दे दीजिए इनको. हाँ जरूर.
The good lady talked about sovereignty. A beggar nation cannot be a sovereign nation. Afghanistan is your marsh, your bog. The more you support these illiterate savages, the more they will damage your country. Have some mind, have some brain. What are you doing? Committing suicide. Why don't you extend your hand of friendship to Iran? What has Iran done to you? The Quad has been formed. Sabers have been drawn. Where are we? Please answer me.
Thank you, sir, for that very passionate
already
question.
answered
But I think your comment is well taken. The panel actually agrees with you. The gentleman in the front. You also have a question, please. After him, then.
Yes. जब हमारे अंदरूनी सलामती का इशू जब आता है तो हमारी स्टेट इन मजहबी इंतहा पसंदों को पालती भी है और जब वो धरने देती है तो 2-2 हज़ार रुपये दे के रवाना करती है. तो क्या उस दौर में हम इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी हम बाहर वालों को क्यों इल्ज़ाम दें कि वो बाहर से आ रहे हैं जब इनको पाल रहे हैं, इनको पेरोल पे दे रहे हैं, इनको इंतखाबात में जितवा रहे हैं? तो हाउ कैन पॉसिबल पाकिस्तान का अंदरूनी सलामती कैसे मुमकिन हो?
बहुत अच्छा. आप में से कोई जवाब देना चाहेगा? आप बिल्कुल
देखिए, अगर आपको पूरा कहानी नहीं पता होता है ना, तो परसेप्शन बिल्डअप करता है. जब वो धरना ख़त्म हुआ था तो कम से कम 2000 आदमी फैज़ाबाद चौक में रह गए थे जिनके पास खाने का पैसा नहीं था, जाने का पैसा नहीं था और कुछ मतलब घर जाने का पैसा नहीं था. उस वक्त उनको पैसे दिए गए तुम घर जाओ. गलती ये हुई कि किसी ने यूनिफॉर्म में उठा के पैसे दे दिए तो बताया गया कि जिनको पैसे दिए गए.
ऐसी गलतियां नहीं करनी चाहिए ना.
मैं आपको बताता हूँ ये सच है. बिल्कुल आपने एक उठा के उनको पैसे दिए घर जाने के लिए. और ये इस्लामाबाद हाई एक
Ikram Sehgal sahab, the question is much larger than that. The
but you know that is a part of the
The-
appeasement. Yeah.
was that why does state appease such elements? That was the question. Salma, please.
On a lighter note, sir, इस्लामाबाद आए हुए थे कुछ शॉपिंग का भी तो बनता है ना? On a lighter note, sir, इस्लामाबाद आए हुए थे शॉपिंग का भी बनता है। सर देखिए, बेसिकली चीज़ ये है कि क्लैरिटी ऑफ विजन हमें चाहिए कि हम अपने स्टेट से चाहते क्या हैं, टॉप डाउन टू बॉटम अप, व्हाट ऑल वी नीड। मैं ये नहीं कह रही कि हर आदमी एक ही सोच सोचे, होमोजेनिटी की बात नहीं हो रही, हेट्रोजेनिटी की भी हो रही है, येट द वेरी फैक्ट इज़ कि वी नीड टू हैव अ प्रायोरिटीज़ क्लियर। आपका क्वेश्चन अबाउट अपीजमेंट एंड पीछे जो साहब थे उनका सवाल जो था with regards to the choices that we have made, they have cost us a lot. They have cost us very, they have been very expensive choices that we have made. However, अगर हमने उससे कोई लेसन ड्रॉ किया है तो हमें उस लेसन को पॉजिटिवली टर्न करके आगे मिस्टेक्स नहीं करनी चाहिए। जो पॉइंट हम लोग आज देख रहे हैं, आप भी जिस चीज़ की तरफ पॉइंट आउट कर रहे हैं, सहगल साहब ने भी पॉइंट आउट किया था, क्योंकि एज अ मिलिट्री मैन ही हैज़ विटनेस्ड द थिंग्स कि जो हमने पास्ट में मिस्टेक्स की हैं, अगर हम उनको रिपीट ना करें तो वो हमारे लिए बहुत आगे के लिए एक रोशन राह खोलता है।
लेकिन मेरा
अगर हम
ख्याल है
उन्हीं मिस्टेक्स को रिपीट करते हैं तो फिर दैट मीन्स वी आर इन अ रट, सो
So,
नथिंग कैन
सलमा,
हैपन।
आपकी बात बिल्कुल सही है और हमारे एक कम से कम इंटेलेक्चुअल कंसेंसस तो है कि दिस इज प्लेइंग विद फायर और ये खेल अब बंद होना चाहिए। यस,
I have a very brief questions, two brief questions. First is that until and unless आप जिस सिक्योरिटी थ्रेट की बात कर रहे हैं, हम जिस तरह निज़ामी साहब ने बात की कि डाइवर्सिफिकेशन ऑफ फॉरेन पॉलिसी की जहाँ तक बात है, हम पिछले 70 साल से ये देख रहे हैं कि पाकिस्तान में स्ट्रेटेजिक जितनी भी स्ट्रेटेजिक पॉलिसी है उसको डिसाइड करने वाले सर्टन इंस्टीट्यूशंस हैं। तो पाकिस्तान की स्ट्रेटेजिक पॉलिसी मेकिंग को भी तो डाइवर्सिफाई करने की ज़रूरत है। कब तक इसके अंदर ये इंप्रेशन बरकरार है कि उसमें जो पॉलिसी मेकिंग है उसके अंदर आवाम का या जो अवामी नुमाइंदे हैं उनका किरदार महदूद है या बढ़ता नहीं है? और दूसरा सवाल ये, इट कैन बी अ कंक्लूडिंग क्वेश्चन, हम जब हमारा मुल्क कायम हुआ उस वक्त कोल्ड वॉर स्टार्ट हो रही थी, हम अब एक मरतबा फिर सुन रहे हैं कि पोस्ट कोल्ड वॉर ख़त्म होती जा रही है, जो कोल्ड वॉर के बाद दुनिया बनी थी उसका ऑर्डर ख़त्म हो रहा है। तीनों पैनलिस्ट से मेरी गुजारिश है कि आप फरमाइए, क्या हमारी प्रायोरिटीज़ इन प्लेस हैं इस वक्त जब हम रशिया, यूक्रेन और यूरोप में जब कुछ हो रहा है उसके हवाले से?
निज़ामानी साहब, आप जवाब दे दीजिए, वैसे उन्होंने जवाब सबसे मांगा।
नहीं, वो देखें, आप जो कह रहे हैं बात, द थिंग इज़ ये अपीजमेंट ये सब कनेक्टेड चीज़ें हैं या क्या, तो उसमें बिकॉज इफ़ पाकिस्तान काइंड ऑफ ये कि जी उसको या उसके लोगों को ये पता हो कि उनके लिए जो कानून बनता है या जो उनके लिए पॉलिसी बनती है वो कहाँ पे बनती है और वो क्या उनके रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स बनाते हैं कि नहीं। अब उसमें हम लाख बहस कर सकते हैं कि जी फ़लाँ इलेक्शन सही नहीं होते, फ़लाँ पार्टी को गलत, लेकिन सो द थिंग इज़ द मोर पार्लियामेंट becomes the pivot or the center of decision making on key legislation as well, the more you can say कि people's stakes will be in that, क्योंकि अब पिछले कुछ पैटर्न सा बन गया हुआ है कि लेजिस्लेटर्स जो हैं जिनको हमने इलेक्ट करके बैठा हुआ है वो अंदर बैठे हुए हैं। Anyone who can gather 40,000 or 20,000 people, they can go and they can dictate how the laws of the land will be. That and yielding to that is an affront or is an insult to the intelligence of Pakistani voters, right? So I think we need to strengthen the parliament, and the parliament, it is incumbent upon all parliamentarians not to hurl that easy thing that whosoever they disagree with is a traitor. They are
Nizamani
all
Sahab, as romantic as this may sound, but may I just pose a provocative question here? Where in the world foreign policy is decided by the people or even by the parliaments? What is manufacturing of consent? What is invasion of Iraq? What is invasion of Libya? What is the exit from Afghanistan?
Yeah, well, one is not saying that there is a Puritan country where every policy is made by, say, parliamentarians but at the end of the day, some of these countries that kind of we cited, it is the buck stops at whosoever the chief executive is, right? It is, I mean, it is not American president. He cannot wiggle out of it saying, "Ji, humne kahin se aur se pata chal gaya tha." He or she'll have to take up the responsibility.
That may be how consent is manufactured. But having said this, we have some questions. We'll take those. जी कौन किसके पास माइक है ये बहुत देर से सवाल करना चाह रहे हैं और अगर पीछे से कोई स्टूडेंट्स भी हैं तो मैं चाहूँगी वो उनके सवाल लें
I just wanted to make an observation. इकराम साहब ने बहुत बेहतरीन तरीके से बताया कि वह Pakistan sits at the crossroads of the geopolitics of the world, where all the major powers have interest out there. Ever since Pakistan's creation, United States invited Pakistan as an ally of the West. And we stuck with that till the end of the Cold War. After the Cold War, United States then switched its alliance or its interest more towards India. Pakistan then started strengthening its relationship with China. The only point I want to make out here, all the large powers, including Russia, China, and United States, because the Middle East, the oil is right here on the other side. We can probably see it, you know what the Middle East is. Inka interest ek hi hai. They need Pakistan's geopolitical strategic location control of that and the military of Pakistan. They are not interested in the great judiciary of Pakistan or the great journalism of Pakistan with due respect to them. These are the only two interests. And this will continue for the next 50 to 100 years. I can guarantee that.
I'll let Ikram Sehgal respond to that.
This is my favorite subject, so I can answer this question. We became part of the Baghdad Pact. Very correctly, we were a shield against communism for the Arab oil. That Baghdad Pact then became a Central Treaty Organization after Iraq went out of it. We were still the shield. Pakistan, Iran, Turkey. Pakistan, Iran, Turkey. 3 Muslim non-Arab states with tremendous armies, tremendous armed forces, each one of them. Thereafter, after the, like you said, we were abandoned once. We were always been abandoned. When we are needed, we are taken as a friend. When we are needed, we become the cornerstone of policy. When we are not needed, we become the gravestone of their policy. So the point is very simple. Pakistan does not need to, one way or the other. Look at Pakistan, Iran, Turkey today. The only Muslim countries in the world in this region with their armies, armed forces intact. Not finished like Libya, not finished or compromised like Egypt, not finished like Syria, right? Syria was a very this thing. So my point is the world has changed. The new world order, in the new world order, we'll have not to take sides. Our best course of action to be aggressively neutral, to do what is correct. Now, in 1951, unfortunately, our Prime Minister made a mistake, I would say, of going to Washington when Russia, Soviet Union was inviting him again and again to come to Moscow, right? After that, the whole thing changed. We became part of their CENTO, CETO, whatever. Now, at this point of time, whoever was the Prime Minister of Pakistan could not have avoided going to Moscow at this time. And I think he managed to come out of it pretty well. And he did, and I think we did the right thing of abstaining, not taking any sides. Because if we had taken sides, one way or the other, we would have, first of all, we would have certainly lost our friends in our region. And number two, if we had taken the other side, we would have been abandoned exactly when we needed them not to be. Please understand Ukraine's position today. President Zelensky is going on the BBC every day and CNN asking for help, begging for help. This is the same thing which happened to Ethiopia in 1936, when the League of Nations collapsed. They kept on asking, the king of Ethiopia, emperor, or whatever, kept on asking, the Germans are invading us, help. Nobody helped them, right? So this is the point is, you are your best guarantee for existence. And the nuclear thing gives us that guarantee. Because the nuclear deterrence, you go on the MAD theory, the mutually assured deterrence.
Thank you. We'd like to take more questions. I see a lot of hands. The one at the back, please, because we haven't taken any questions from the back.
शुक्रिया हम इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी की बात करते हैं, एक्सटर्नल सिक्योरिटी की बात कर रहे हैं, यूक्रेन पे भी बात कर रहे हैं, अफगानिस्तान का भी जिक्र कर रहे हैं और बांग्लादेश के अलमिया पे भी बात हो रही है, मगर इस पूरे इंटरनल और एक्सटर्नल डिस्कशन में जो बलूचिस्तान का इशू है वो डिस्कस नहीं होता। हमें ये भी नज़र आता है कि कोई पैदल मार्च जा रहा है तुर्बत से कोयटा तक, कोई इस्लामाबाद में पिट रहा है, कोई लाहौर में पिट रहा है, मगर पूरा डिस्कशन डिबेट में ये कहीं जिक्र नहीं आता। तो ये क्या हमारा जो डिबेट डिस्कशन इसके काबिल नहीं है या हम समझते नहीं हैं?
नहीं, आपने मिस किया, क्योंकि मैंने डायरेक्ट सवाल बलूचिस्तान के हवाले से डॉक्टर निज़ामानी से किया था और हम दोबारा उसका जवाब ले सकते हैं। मेरा ख्याल है कि बलूचिस्तान की अहमियत के हवाले से कोई शक व शुबहात इसलिए नहीं है क्योंकि ये मुल्क की जो ज्योग्राफी है वो बलूचिस्तान की वजह से है, तो उसकी अहमियत और के बारे में कोई इबाम नहीं है। उसको बेहतर तौर हैंडल करना चाहिए, वहाँ मल्टी प्रॉन्ग स्ट्रैटेजी होनी चाहिए, वो पाकिस्तान की सॉफ्ट बैली है, उसको एक्सप्लॉइट किया जाता है, ये तमाम बातें बिल्कुल बजा हैं और हमें वहाँ पे बेहतर तौर काम करना चाहिए। Yes, this girl in purple shirt, right in the front.
Hello, I have two comments and a question. The first comment is initially आपने एक बात कही कि कल जो अटैक हुआ पेशावर में that did not have any sectarian connotations to it, and I respectfully disagree. We can't shy away from the fact that sectarian violence in itself is a very important issue, and it happens. There's a reason why certain minorities, certain sects are targeted for being who they are. So we can't shy away from the fact. I believe you had made that comment, and I do disagree with that very strongly, because unless you identify the problem, you can't really deal with it. Another thing that I really do agree with what Mr. Sehgal had said, that corruption is a very big issue. And so then you've got people in the judiciary who then author judgments saying that jo Faizabad mein hua tha, that was an intelligence failure. And then that justice of the Supreme Court is then personally targeted. So, you know, you do have impartiality, and there may be another story to it, but optics do matter. So, you know, you do have members who are trying to make a difference, but then they're also targeted. So where do we stand vis-a-vis that? And the question that I have is that all the discussions that we've had are very orthodox in terms of security. What about cybersecurity? Is that something that Pakistan is working with? Do we have a policy regarding that? Thank you.
Okay, I will respond to questions that are directed to me. When I said should not give it a sectarian color, my thrust was that it's not about Shia, Sunni, and sectarianism, by the way, is a fault line that is exploited, and then that becomes a threat to security. But I think if it's even an Ahmadi mosque attacked in my country, then, even then the state is responsible and should provide protection, because all of us are citizens of this country, and diversity, inclusivity, belonging, this title of this session today demands that they should be addressed. If you identify, people do this to exploit this fault line. People come and fish in troubled waters. So sectarian is a fault line that is exploited, and that is what I refer to. Your other question was about cybersecurity. We today do not have a cybersecurity policy. I know that for a fact, but we are working very, very hard on it. And the security paper is very categorical about it, that something should come out of it. What was Salma? Would you like
I'd like to.
Okay, we have two more.
Can you hear me? I think Pakistan, I'll give you two examples in Karachi of false flag operations. One was the attack on the facilities in Fiara Faisal, the PF base. The other was the attack on the Karachi airport. Do you know not one of the people who died there was Pakistani? Not one of them. They were all mercenaries recruited from outside. False flag operations. They were done for a purpose. Now I tell you about the operation in Faisal base. The people got in from the northern end of the base. They walked past 35 aircraft, multi-million-dollar aircraft. But they went for the P-3C Orion, which was being actually done at the moment by the Chinese who were working there. So why were they taking the P-3 Orions, leaving 35 aircraft, walking down to this thing, etc., right? So I do not know what the facts are, but you know, to have proxy wars, you always buy people or you give them this thing. I am not 100% sure, but I can think of this attack on this mosque, Imam Barga, being a false flag operation, somebody goaded into it to create a sectarian position, right? That is what we should guard against, right? And I totally agree with you about cybersecurity. That is a major, major problem. And particularly our
Also,
banks have been
artificial
hacked.
intelligence. We need to work on artificial intelligence also, but we are. Selma, you wanted to make a comment? Before we take another question.
जी, इकराम साहब has already mentioned that. बात वही है कि हमें जो एक acceptability सी या एक हमारे अवाम नास में भी एक बात आ गई है कि अच्छा फलां को अटैक किया जा रहा है तो चलो ठीक है एक हमारा तबका है जो इस तरह सोचता है राइट सो हमें वो सोच चेंज करने की बहुत ज़रूरत है बिकॉज एवरी वंस लाइफ इज़ प्रेशियस राइट देन वी ऑल्सो नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड बट जो बात इकराम साहब कह रहे हैं उसमें ये है कि ये बातें हमें सिर्फ तब समझ आ सकती हैं एंड टू एवरी वन जब देर इज़ सर्टन लेवल ऑफ ट्रांसपेरेंसी फ्रॉम द सिक्योरिटी सेक्टर और जो एक इम्पेरेटिव है इस पूरी डिबेट में वो ये है कि जो सिक्योरिटी सेक्टर है जिसमें टॉप पे जुडिशरी से लेके हर किस्म का प्राइवेट सिक्योरिटी भी आती है डिफेंस भी आता है लॉ इन्फोर्समेंट आता है हर तबका आता है जो कि सिक्योरिटी से रिलेटेड है जब तक उसकी प्रॉपर किस्म की रिफॉर्म ट्रांसपेरेंसी एंड अकाउंटेबिलिटी नहीं होगी उस वक्त तक बहुत सारी चीज़ें जो है ग्रे एरियाज़ में रहेंगी और उनकी परफॉर्मेंस जो है उस पर क्वेश्चन मार्क लगा रहेगा और ये एक सेंटेंस में कहने वाली बात बड़ी अच्छी लग रही है ये कोई आसान बात नहीं है पुलिस के अंदर से भी रिफॉर्म्स की कोशिश की गई है बाहर से भी की गई है इनर्शिया है इंस्टीट्यूशंस की रेजिस्टेंस है एक्सटर्नल रेजिस्टेंस है तो ये बहुत सारी चीज़ें हैं जो हमको रोकती हैं जहाँ तक आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस साइबर सिक्योरिटी की बात आई फ़ौरन से पहले एज ऑफ यस्टरडे हमें ये चीज़ें करने की ज़रूरत है बिकॉज पाकिस्तान इज़ वन ऑफ द मोस्ट वल्नरेबल स्टेट हम लोग ये बातों में कह देते हैं कि जी फ़लाँ डॉक्यूमेंट खुल गए एंड EU की डिसइंफॉर्मेशन लैब का डिस्क्लोजर हो गया व्हाट हैव वी डन अबाउट इट वी कांट डू मच अबाउट इट बिकॉज हमारे पास वो टूल्स एंड टूल किट ही नहीं है जिससे हम इसको एड्रेस करें या काउंटर करें सो दैट्स द पॉइंट
front that we need to sort of work on. I would like to take as many questions as you want, but I'm being told that Salma has a session upstairs. So thank you so much for being so patient, and I thank you all.